Born on March 12, 1982, in Mariestad, Sweden, to Vinod and Nilam Hindocha, Annie's family was originally from Uganda but were forced to leave in the 70s after the country's president, Idi Amin, expelled all Indian minorities, giving them 90 days to leave Uganda. At the time of the expulsion, there were an estimated 80,000 Ugandans of Indian descent living in the country, of whom 23,000 had their applications for citizenship both processed and accepted, and the Hindochas were one of them. The family moved to Sweden, where they were granted residence and settled in Mariestad before Annie was born. Annie had two older siblings, her brother Anish and her sister Amy. After settling down, Vinod Hindocha and Nilam, Annie's mother, started earning a living through picking strawberries. Later, Vinod got a job as an electrical technician at Mariestad's Elautomatic Fastigat AB, and the family were very settled. While describing his daughter as intelligent and ambitious, Vinod admitted that she was full of life and wasn't the type to stay idle.
Honest girl. Very good looking, of course. My daughter. She was full of life. Always.
Annie's cousin described her as the leader of the pack and the glue of the family, despite being the youngest. Her brother Anish said she was a smiling person and cared so much about her family and friends.
Be positive to life. She cared. The most important things for her was always her family and friends.
Family was everything to her, and she was looking to start one of her own. Her sister Amy had 2 kids, and she loved them to the extent that she had pictures of them on her work desk. After graduating university with a degree in engineering, Annie moved to Stockholm, where she got a job in marketing at mobile phone company Ericsson. As Annie approached her mid-20s, she was looking to settle down and hoping to find the man of her dreams with whom she'd spend the rest of her life. Annie regularly visited London and spent much of her time shopping, socialising and making new friends. In 2009, Annie made her usual trip to London, where she met Shrien Dewani from Bristol, who was of Indian descent. Shrien's mother was also from Uganda and had to move to the UK for the same reason as Annie's parents more than 2 decades ago. Dewani was successful and well respected, working in his family's multi-million-dollar chain of nursing homes, and was already a millionaire before the age of 30. One of Annie's aunts in the UK had met Dewani on several occasions and felt he would be a perfect match for her niece. So she set them up on a date at a coffee shop. But the duo didn't hit it off on the first day, as Annie wasn't too interested. Shrien had been engaged previously, but the wedding was called off in what was described as a trivial family misunderstanding. So, with Shrien looking to make his next relationship work, he asked for a second date, and that was when things wore a new look. On paper, they were like the perfect couple. The two looked perfect for each other. Shrien was a dashing single man from a wealthy, respected Hindu family in Bristol, while Annie was a beautiful, outgoing Indian woman from a close-knit family living in Sweden. But people who knew Shrien had diverse opinions about him. While some said he was kind and generous, others said he was arrogant and liked to show off his wealth. But according to Amy, Annie was happy with Shrien, as she often talked about how much she liked his sense of humour and how he made her feel protected. However, Annie worked in Sweden while her Prince Charming was based in the UK, so the distance made things a bit tough. Even though it wasn't ideal, they started a long-distance relationship. They didn't see each other often, and when they did, Shrien kept her at arm's length in the bedroom. He tried to excuse it by telling her he was undergoing infertility treatments that tied him out. And this came as a shock to Annie, who was very interested in starting up a family. So, she broke it off in December 2009, but Shrien wasn't ready to let her go. After weeks of assuring her the treatments were working, she took him back, but he insisted they hold off on intimacy until they were married. Determined to make it work, Annie gave up her job in Stockholm and moved in with her cousin Shrien Dewani in London so she could be closer to Shrien. At the time, her parents flew in to meet Shrien's family, and Vinod admitted to being intimidated by the wealth of the Dewanis, but said they were very warm and welcoming. Everyone had grown to like Shrien because he was educated, polite, and driven. However, the couple began to have petty disagreements, and Anni wasn't sure they had much of a future together. But just 3 months later, Shrien asked her family for their blessing to propose. And this should have been one of the happiest moments of their relationship, but it was far from it. The engagement brought out the worst in him. Shrien was cold, controlling, and critical of her appearance and habits. According to reports, he once said he wanted to turn her from an ugly duckling into a swan. She wrote him an email calling off their engagement, but Shrien promised to change. He already had broken an engagement in his past, and another one would shame his family. So she reconsidered, and he whisked her away to Paris in a private jet to celebrate with a $40,000 diamond engagement ring. So, in October 2010, hundreds of guests gathered just outside of Mumbai to celebrate the 3-day wedding of Shrien Dewani and Anni Hindocha. It was a truly exquisite event, and Anni had spent 3 months in India planning it. Vinod said that although his family was not wealthy like the Dewanis, he had been saving for his children's wedding since they were born, and wanted to give Anni everything she had dreamed of. The ceremony was beautiful and could perfectly be described as a magical wedding. As picture-perfect as the wedding had seemed, things weren't really smooth behind the scenes. Her cousin remembers when Anni told her that Shrien's first words to her as her husband were, "Your sorry is not proper." Later, she confided that they were just acting out the rest of the wedding. She endured the ceremony with a smile, but everyone who knew her could see she wasn't happy. Even some of Anni's close friends and associates recall feeling weird about the whole thing. Some say it didn't feel like Anni was very present, while others refer to the wedding as a strange experience that didn't feel like the friend she knew. On the night of the wedding, a tearful Anni called her best friend and cousin, Sneha Indocha, to share her honeymoon suite in the Mumbai Marriott after Shrien refused to be intimate with her. Shrien slept on the sofa and the girls in the bedroom. Sneha said Anni kept asking her if she'd ever find another man after expressing doubt over Dewani, who was supposedly a nice guy. So 3 weeks after the wedding, the couple headed to South Africa on their 10-day honeymoon. Anni had no idea where they were going, and the whole thing had been planned by Shrien, who said he liked how the country's initials matched their names. Their future looked as sparkly as her diamond ring. On paper, the perfect couple was destined for the perfect life, but appearances can be deceiving. Before jetting off to South Africa, the newly married couple went home to Bristol to check on construction. But things weren't right between them, and in a series of heartbreaking texts to her cousin, Anni revealed her anguish at her new marriage. Anni described her husband as a monster and talked about leaving him. Anni's text to her cousin said things like, "I don't want to go anywhere with him, I want to divorce," and "Crying is my new hobby." But it wasn't just that. A few days before their honeymoon, Anni sent Shrien an email saying, "I don't want an insecure man, or a man whose feelings don't come naturally, or that you have to force yourself. I am ready to pack and leave, and this is not a joke." Divorce wasn't an option he wanted to talk about. The Dewanis were a well-respected Hindu family. It wouldn't look good for them if his new wife left him. With false smiles on their faces, they boarded a plane and flew into Cape Town from Johannesburg for their honeymoon on Friday, November 12th. Shrien was looking to flag down a taxi. Instead of using the hotel's dedicated car service, he opted for the local shuttle service at a cheaper rate. A driver named Zola Tongo pulled over in a Volkswagen minivan, and the couple began the 20-minute drive to their lavish waterfront hotel called Cape Grace. Before Zola dropped the Dewanis at their hotel, Shrien asked Tongo to wait for him so he could make plans for him to pick them up the following night for dinner. He also said he wanted Zola to show them around Cape Town. Tongo agreed to act almost as an official tour guide for the pair. In this footage, you can see Shrien heading back to the parking lot to meet Tongo. After the discussion between the duo, Shrien is seen walking back to the hotel. While all of this was going on, Annie, on the other hand, was shown to their room. The following day, the couple had an amazing time at the bar, having drinks and taking pictures. At least, that's what we're made to believe from CCTV footage. After that, they can be seen heading back to their hotel room. Shrien and Anni Dewani looked perfect for each other, and if the footage is anything to go by, they were simply inseparable. But there's a lot more than meets the eye. At 7:30 p.m, Tongo returned to the hotel to pick them up and take them to dinner. Shrien reserved a table at 96 Winery Road, one of the most acclaimed restaurants in the area. But the couple soon changed their plans and headed to Surfside Restaurant in Strand for a lighter meal. Tongo returned to pick them up by 10:30 p.m, and it was time to head back to Cape Grace. But Shrien said Annie wanted to see the real and raw side of South Africa. And if you think about it, it does make some sense. They lived in a 5-star hotel in a beautiful environment, and so maybe she just wanted to get away from that and see the more authentic side of Cape Town. So, with Annie insisting, Zola drove them to a township 15 kilometers from Cape Town called Gugulethu. Gugulethu is known to be pretty dangerous, especially at night. With its extremely high crime rates, one would wonder why Tonga, who's familiar with the terrain, would take the couple for a drive within the area at that time of night. At 10:45 p.m, Tongo pulled off the highway and waited at an intersection preparing to turn. And out of nowhere, 2 gun-wielding men rushed to the vehicle and started banging on the windows. Eventually, one of the guys forces Zola out of the driver's seat while the other sits at the back. They began driving around, with the couple holding each other in the back seat, terrified. They robbed Shrien of his expensive designer watch, mobile phone, wallet, and money, while Annie's jewelry and other valuables were taken. The man who was driving said they didn't want to hurt the couple, and they would actually let them go, but separately. So, Shrien was ejected from the taxi, and the men sped off into the night with the hysterical Annie in the back seat. A visibly distressed Shrien approached a bystander who assisted him by calling the police. The police arrived shortly after and took Shrien back to where it had happened, driving around and trying to piece everything together. But Annie was nowhere to be found. They also quickly located the taxi driver, Zola Tongo, who had reported the carjacking, and everyone headed back together to the Cape Grace Hotel. Annie's parents were eventually notified about the kidnap of their daughter by Shrien's dad. They didn't find out from the police, or even Shrien himself, so it was a little bit disappointing at first. But Vinod was willing to give the kidnappers whatever they wanted, as long as his daughter returned home safe. But that never happened. As soon as they got off the phone, Vinod booked the first flight from Sweden to Cape Town, but something happened before he touched down. On the 14th of November, the police received a call from a resident living in a neighbourhood in Khayelitsha, about a 20-minute drive from Gugulethu. They reported that a VW Charan had been sitting alongside the road all night. At 8 a.m, the police got to the vehicle. Lying across the back seat was the body of Anni Dewani, who had been shot once at point-blank range in the neck, and the bullets were lodged in the seats. Police later confirmed that Annie's designer watch, a white gold and diamond bracelet, her BlackBerry mobile phone, and her handbag were missing, and assumed they were stolen. According to the authorities, the stolen items had an estimated value of 90,000 rand, equivalent to $6,089. A post-mortem examination, which was immediately carried out on the body, revealed bruising on her inner leg, which indicated that there had been a struggle. Annie had died from a single shot from a 9mm pistol, and the bullet had gone through her hand, grazed her shoulder, and then went through her neck, severing an artery in the process. She hadn't been sexually assaulted, and this made the whole scene look like a robbery gone wrong. But was it? Police then informed Shrien about his wife's death, and this was how he took the shocking news. But did Shrien find it shocking? Was he looking distressed? Tragically, her father heard of this as he was boarding his connecting flight from Amsterdam, and he felt totally numb all through. When a full-scale investigation began on the case, the police were confident that this wasn't a theft gone wrong. They wondered why the attackers would leave Shrien and Zola unharmed, knowing they could head straight to the police and identify them, and decided to kill Anni instead. Soon, the murder of Anni Dewani took a vast amount of space in the news and had immense media coverage from all over the world. The investigation was moving at a rapid pace, and after dusting the minivan for prints, police found a match: 25-year-old Klile Mngeni. Mngeni, who was arrested on the 16th of November, 3 days after the murder, had past criminal records, and his prints were still on the system. The 25-year-old confessed to the crime almost immediately and gave the police the name of another hijacker, Mziwamadoda Kwabe. Kwabe, who was arrested on the 18th of November, also had a criminal record. Mziwamadoda Kwabe pretty much confessed to the crime right away and threw a new man into the mix: Monde Mlombo, a receptionist in another hotel. Soon, the driver of the taxi, Zola Tongo, was fingered as an accomplice and was subsequently arrested. While all of these unfolded, Dewani's corpse was released by the South African authorities and returned to the UK on a British Airways flight, accompanied by Shrien. Her family would later scatter her ashes in the Vänern Lake near her hometown, Mariestad, Sweden. Back in South Africa, the investigation had taken a new turn following Zola Tonga's confession. Tonga was escorted into Winburg Magistrates Court, his face hidden by a sheet. It had been announced that he was likely to enter a plea bargain and receive a more lenient sentence in exchange for more information about the case. Zola insisted that this was no random attack and alleged that Shrien had orchestrated the entire crime. He said that the day he picked up the couple from the airport and dropped them at the hotel, Shrien returned to talk to him while Anni went inside. According to the CCTV, Shrien spent almost 10 minutes talking to Tonga in the car. What Shrien allegedly said was that he wanted someone taken off the scene, and Tonga replied that he wasn't the man for the job, but he knew someone. He said that Shrien offered 15,000 rand at the time to carry out the murder. To some, the CCTV footage proved Tonga was telling the truth, while others said that the footage also backed Shrien's side of the story. Tonga said that after he drove away, he headed to the hotel where Monde worked. And it was here that Monde contacted Kwabe, and the plan was set in motion. According to Zola, he picked up Shrien on the 14th of November and took him to where he could exchange his money in order to pay for the hit. Vinod recalled calling his daughter at the time, but Shrien happened to be with her phone and told his father-in-law that he was out to exchange cash. So Zola takes Shrien back to the hotel and goes to meet up with Kwabe, who introduces him to Mngeni. The trio comes to the conclusion that they will carry out the plot in Gugulethu. So that night, Zola picks up Shrien and Anni and takes them to dinner before heading to Gugulethu, where the car gets hijacked and Anni is murdered. Tonga even said that Shrien had told him the cash was in an envelope in a pouch behind the front seat. Police said that the texts and calls between the duo were corroborated by cell phone data analysis, but because Shrien's phone was never located, the content of messages would probably never be known. And that's not all. Zola said that the morning after the hijacking, before Anni's body was found, he actually met with Shrien at the Cape Grace Hotel. In the meeting, Shrien Dewani allegedly kept asking if it was done and if Anni had been killed. In the course of the discussion, Dewani can be seen talking to the cleaner, who he allegedly told to give them some privacy. Tongo, sitting in the bottom left, said he warned Shrien that there was a camera in the room. Watch as Shrien looks up towards the camera. 2 days after Anni's murder, Zola Tongo met Mr. Dewani at the Cape Grace Hotel, where he gave him an envelope with 1,000 rand in a white plastic bag. Dewani allegedly handed him the envelope in the hotel's internet room where there was no CCTV camera. Zola later emerged on footage carrying the white plastic bag. At the time, Dewani was in the UK and claimed he was having mental challenges and couldn't stand trial. Anni's family was certain Shrien had had a hand in the death of their daughter, but they wanted him to go to South Africa to clear himself if he was indeed innocent, as he claimed.
If he says he's not involved in anything, he should proudly go to South Africa, say, I didn't do it, here I am, give me a trial.
But there were claims and counterclaims that Dewani couldn't get a fair trial in South Africa and might even lose his life. However, Annie's uncle was furious. He said the case was judicial and should stay that way.
This should not go political. It is jurisdictional and it should stay so.
Shrien would later be arrested in Bristol on suspicion of committing murder. And in March 2011, the judge ruled that Shrien should be extradited to answer for his crimes in South Africa. There was a lot of back and forth, which involved his lawyers appealing the ruling. However, Shrien would later be extradited to South Africa on April 7, 2014. There were also allegations that Shrien was gay and had been paying a male prostitute named Leopold Lisa for sex. Known to his clients as the German Master, Leopold said that he met Dewani in the Midlands area of England and in West London between September 2009 and April 2010, and the Bristol-based millionaire had paid him $1,700 for kinky sex 3 times. He also said that Shrien had confided in him that he was in a new relationship he needed to get out of, but Shrien denied the allegations, saying he was blissfully happy with his new bride. On the first day of his trial, the court heard more about his sexuality, and in a written statement read out by his lawyers, Shrien said that despite his previous denials, he was actually bisexual. Annie's family spoke of their disappointment of not knowing this about him and said they were prepared to sue him for not being honest with them. A list of admissions released by the courts also shows that Shrien had been looking at gay porn and dating websites on their honeymoon, and just hours after Annie's body was found. The prosecution said that this, combined with the statements from the German Master Leopold and several others, clearly showed that Shrien was conflicted and desperate to hide a big part of his life. They argued that this wasn't about his sexuality per se, rather, it was about the conversations in which he had disclosed his desire to get out of the marriage. However, the 4 men in South Africa were all sentenced for the murder of Anni Dewani. Kwabe entered a plea deal where he would receive 25 years in exchange for his testimony against Shrien. Zola also received a plea deal and was sent to prison for 18 years. But Monde, the man who had orchestrated the plot, was surprisingly granted immunity from prosecution in exchange for his truthful testimony against Shrien. However, the authorities felt there was no point offering Ngeni a plea deal because he possibly couldn't have taken them any further in the case. He was ultimately convicted to life in prison, where he later died from a brain tumour. Shrien, on the other hand, pled not guilty to all of the charges against him. The prosecution argued that because he was secretly gay and his culture didn't agree to divorce, he murdered Annie to get out of that marriage. But the defence argued that Shrien was bisexual, and that fact had nothing to do with the matter. They also argued that the CCTV footage of Shrien walking in with the envelope and Zola walking out with it was actually just Shrien paying Zola for his driving services for the time in Cape Town. They also made the case that it would have been so dumb of Shrien to ask the very first person he met in a country he had never been to help him commit murder. And that's not all. They argued that Zola, after dropping them off at the hotel, realised the couple had expensive properties and tipped off the others. Shrien's team put up a pretty solid defence and found a lot of holes in Zola's story. So, 3 months after the trial began, everything eventually came to an end after the judge pronounced her judgment.
In the circumstances, I make the following order. The application in terms of Section 174 of the Criminal Procedure Act is granted. The accused is found not guilty on this charge, and Mr. Mlombo is not granted indemnity from prosecution.
The case against Shrien was dismissed. Justice Janet Traverso, the judge on the case, said that Zola was the only one who could link Shrien to the crime, but his evidence contained a bunch of lies, so he wasn't a credible witness. She also said none of the other men were credible witnesses either, as they were all intelligent and could have easily come up with a story against Shrien. Anni's family was terribly devastated by the news and felt like the justice system had let them down.
I think over the past 4 years, we as a family have suppressed a lot of emotions and stayed strong. But today, when all of this fall apart, we just don't know how to hold on to that anymore.
In 2021, after serving half his sentence, Tonga was up for parole, and Anni's family paid him a visit. They showed him a picture of Anni, and Tonga reportedly became emotional. But the family wasn't having any of it, as they said it was all acting, and Zola wasn't remorseful. The murder of Anni Dewani is a polarizing case, and one that continues to haunt her family. Many think Zola Tonga planned all of it, and kidnapped Anni to extort her of her expensive jewellery, which went awfully wrong. At the same time, others speculate that Shrien Dewani masterminded the whole operation and somehow got away with the horrendous crime. But as time passes, Anni's family and friends are still seeking answers, and things can only get tougher for them.
Today was not fair on us because we waited so long, and we just want answers of what happened. And I just feel that it's just not fair.
Please visit our online video course that will teach you everything you need to know about self-defense. 50% of all sales will be donated to a women's charity that combats domestic violence. Link to the program is in the description below.